Dude, yeah. Man, right in the face. Javier Milei is really going after the World Economic Forum. Like, really. He's taking shots at all the enemies of freedom out there worldwide. All that anti-freedom ideology, whether it's a central bank or not. Christine Lagarde, Klaus Schwab, and so on. He even talks about the importance of saving, and how the woke movement is really bringing down Western countries here. This is an ultra-relevant speech. The speech is even relevant here for Bitcoin. Every politician, every citizen, every student, whatever, everyone should have seen this speech. And the most interesting part is this is indirectly about Bitcoin. So Javier Milei never talks directly about Bitcoin here, but Bitcoin is represented indirectly. That's exactly what Javier Milei is getting at here. We're going to take a look at what this massive speech is all about, because the world has never seen anything like this. When I got the speech sent to me, did I get a comment about that from the person who sent it to me? Yeah, right, Mark. That's definitely going to be the last speech from Javier Milei at the World Economic Forum. He really gave it to the enemies of freedom here. But really, the president of Argentina is not only razor sharp in his analysis here, but he also offers solutions. How to really get better organized here. And you can see it here in Argentina or in other countries. He's also talking about freedom right here. It's being ignited in several countries. He's talking about El Salvador, he's talking about Argentina, but he's also talking about a freedom that could potentially be ignited here in the USA. He has a very, very grim outlook for the EU. But hey guys, check this out. And I'm going to tell you exactly where the relevant parts are and where Bitcoin comes into play. In the first part, he talks about how the Western countries are basically going down. He talks about the relevance of free markets. One, from capitalism. He talks about redistribution, and a lot more, but hey, just soak it all in.
In summary, we invented capitalism based on saving, investing, and hard work.
I need to interrupt here for a second. Who says that capitalism is, of course, based on saving here? And this is where Bitcoin comes into play, of course. If we don't have a tool to save here, if we don't have hard money, then capitalism doesn't work either. That's also what Michael Saylor always says. That capital is really, really important here, and that we've never really had anything like good capital before. And now, Bitcoin here. This is the first time we have good capital and can actually get started here to talk about capitalism. Because otherwise, it was more like creditism, where we were basically living on credit. But hey, I don't want to interrupt Milei's speech here. Take it all in what you still have to say.
We've gotten every worker to multiply themselves 10-fold, 100-fold, or why not even 1,000-fold. Their productivity overwhelms, thus, the Malthusian trap. But in the 20th century, we strayed from liberal principles and a political class exploited collectivist ideologies. We're betrayed. New political class, driven by collectivist ideologies, took advantage of massive times, saw the perfect opportunity for power accumulation. The entire wealth that capitalism had created up to that point, had created in the future, should be redistributed through a system of central planning, which set a process in motion. Today, we suffer its catastrophic consequences. By promoting a socialist agenda while slyly operating within the liberal paradigm, this new political class distorted the values of liberalism, replacing freedom with liberation by using the coercive power of the state to redistribute the wealth created by capitalism. Their justification was the grim, unjust, and despicable idea of social justice, supplemented by theoretical Marxist frameworks aimed at freeing the individual from their needs. And at the center of this new value system is the fundamental premise that equality before the law is not enough, that there are hidden systemic injustices, need to be eliminated, an idea that serves as a goldmine for bureaucrats that strive for power. And that's exactly what Bokism is about, the result of the reversal of Western values. Each of the pillars of our civilization has been replaced by various mechanisms of cultural subversion, by a distorted version of itself. Negative rights to life, liberty, and property have been transformed into an artificial and endless list of positive rights. First it was education, then housing, and from there it became absurdities, like access to the internet, to football on TV, to theater, cosmetic treatments, and endless number of other desires as basic human rights. Rights that, of course, someone has to pay for and can only be guaranteed through the endless expansion of the abhorrent state. We have moved from freedom to liberation through state intervention against tyranny. This is Bolshevism's basis. We have shifted from the concept of freedom to the concept of liberation through state intervention before the tyrant's interference. On this basis, Bolshevism has been built, an ideology of monolithic thinking upheld by various institutions, whose goal it is, understand Ken.D punishes with feminism, diversity, inclusion, equality, immigration, abortion, environmental protection, gender ideology, and more. All of these are different heads of the same beast, which aims to. The expansion of the state is justified by appropriating and distorting noble causes.
So he's really not holding back here. And this is really directed at the political class here explicitly. Here in the EU, at the ECB, and all the people running these redistribution programs. Directed. He basically says, we're now faced with a choice between central figures. That means we've had central powers for a long time. And now we're basically at a turning point. And now we obviously have the opportunity to break down the state structure a bit. And of course, the counterpoint would be that we should also structure things in a decentralized way. That we take power from a big, powerful one, as he puts it, parasites, taking away. He's definitely using very strong, very powerful words here. He's saying here that the state isn't some kind of central authority or anything like that. Instead, he's really talking about parasites or something similar in a fierce struggle. He says that this power and this strength need to be taken away again. And for that, we need decentralization. And what is the decentralized money here? What takes the power away from the state? That's pretty clear. Bitcoin. And Bitcoin definitely belongs in this story. He's also talking about the decline in values. He already talked about an organ. The reversal of values, that's also what Milei is addressing here. That suddenly peace is bad. War is good. All of a sudden, we want to go to war. We're sending any tanks here. And sending stuff to war zones and things like that. There have already been interviews about this somewhere on public television. I don't remember who said it now, where some woke politicians said it's really bad if Donald Trump wins here. Because we wouldn't have any more wars soon.
And just like that, there are woke economists here who have said it's really bad.
If we have Bitcoin, then we can't even finance wars anymore. Who's financing our war? Shout out goes out to Mark Hopkins. And that's basically the decline in values that Milei is talking about. That's so important to understand. That we are now at a turning point. So we basically have the choice now whether we want to keep relying on a big government. That basically redistribute our money to central banks that redistribute our money, or if we want to rely on decentralized technologies. Like, for example, Klaus pulling out the chainsaw here, abolishing ministries and cutting down the state. Also to take the money monopoly away from the state. Betting on Bitcoin, things like that. Milei isn't exactly a well-known Bitcoin supporter, but in my opinion, this would fit perfectly with his politics. Although Milei is actually pretty smart. He's not saying, hey, I'm advocating for Bitcoin, but Milei actually goes a step further. He says we have a free currency competition. And free currency competition is actually something much, much better than if we say, we're now going with the Bitcoin standard. Because in a free currency competition, the best money will really prevail. If we have a global free currency competition, then Bitcoin will definitely push its way to the forefront. Because right now, it's mainly that fiat currencies dominate. Because you're basically forced into it. And that's ultimately so important to take away from this, what Milei is saying here. But hey, listen to what Milei has to say next, because this is just the beginning here.
Strangely enough, free nations began to destroy themselves. When they had no more opponents to defeat, peace has made us weak. We were defeated by our own complacency. All of this and other misdevelopments that we can't list due to time constraints are the threats that endanger the West today. And unfortunately, these are the beliefs. The institutions like these have been promoting this for 40 years, and no one here can claim their innocence. For decades, a dark and murderous ideology has been worshipped, as if it were a golden calf moving heaven and earth to impose it on humanity.
So you guys really need to check this out. He's basically invited to the World Economic Forum and tells people right to their faces, hey, Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund, and so on. Klaus Schwab, who says you will own nothing and you will be happy. The people who say, hey, we need to take away free speech from folks, and we need to hammer opinions into their heads. The ones you have to believe in and the ones you have to follow. And Milei pulls these people aside and says, hey folks, what you're pulling here is absolutely unacceptable. Please stop that. We need to switch from the socialism virus to the freedom virus. And that's also what Michael Saylor is always talking about, that Bitcoin is a freedom virus. Although Milei isn't really talking about Bitcoin here.
But, of course, the much bigger whole concept.
The freedom movement, Bitcoin is just one part of it. There are a lot of other things that go along with it. But as I said, Bitcoin is still a relevant player here.
This organization, along with the most influential supranational bodies, were the ideologists of this barbarism. Multilateral lending organizations were instruments of extortion, while many national governments, especially the European Union, acted as their armed wing. Isn't it true that right now, while we're talking, citizens are being arrested in the United Kingdom because they've uncovered terrible crimes committed by Muslim migrants? Crimes that the government is trying to cover up. Or did the Brussels bureaucrats simply suspend the elections in Romania because they didn't like the party that won? In every one of these discussions, the first strategy of wokeness is to discredit those of us who question these things by first shutting us down and then silencing us. If you're white, you have to be racist. If you're a man, you have to be a misogynist or part of the patriarchy. If you're rich, you have to be a cruel capitalist. If you're heterosexual, you have to be heteronormative, homophobic, or transphobic.
And if you're into Bitcoin, then you must be a criminal, of course. Then you must be a really shady person here.
For every challenge, you have a label, and then they try to suppress you by force or through legal means. Because your values of diversity mask your intent to suppress dissent, is actually hiding their blatant desire to eliminate dissent, criticism, and ultimately freedom, so they can keep maintaining a model that benefits them the most. Didn't we just hear about this recently? That they benefit from the most. Didn't we just hear about this recently? Like some leading European authorities and quite openly have actually called for censorship. In reality, there's no censorship, just the idea of silencing those who don't subscribe to the woke ideology. Who don't subscribe to the woke ideology. And what kind of society can wokeness create? A society that replaces the free exchange of goods and services with the arbitrary distribution of wealth at gunpoint. One that replaces free communities with forced collectivization. One that replaces the creative chaos of the market with the sterile and sclerotic order of socialism. A society full of resentment where there are only two types of people. Those who are net taxpayers on the one hand, and those who benefit from the state. The other side. And I don't mean those who receive welfare because they don't have enough to eat. I'm talking about the privileged corporations, the banks that were bailed out during the subprime crisis. Of majority of media. The indoctrination centers disguised as universities. The state bureaucrats, the trade unions, the social associations, and the nepotists. They live off the taxes of hardworking citizens and taxpayers. I'm talking about the world that a footnote in Klaus Schwab's book describes, and unfortunately, it has become a reality. It's a system where the big winner is the political class. That is both the referee and a player in this redistribution game. I'll say it again, the political class is both a referee and a player. They're a vested interest in this redistribution.
This is the part where we're talking about redistribution. And that's ultimately exactly where he makes a reckoning. With the banks. And in the end, he also touches on the bailout packages that keep coming up. And where Bitcoin is basically the antidote to that. Satoshi Nakamoto published the Bitcoin white paper back in 2008 during the great financial crisis. What ultimately happens is exactly what Javier Milei describes here, that big banks are just using their power to basically redistribute money here through the Cantalor effect. About the credit creation effect. It's not just big banks, but also central banks that do this. Of course, the state does it too. The whole big players that Javier Milei ultimately lists here. And then there are just some things that are systemically important. Then banks are too big to fail or whatever. They have to be saved. Profits were privatized. It's disgraceful. And in the end, the profits were privatized beforehand. This is obviously a hell of a mess that's going on here. And that's the argument that the socialists always bring up. He's talking about the Reds, and it's always the same argument like, yeah, we need this mega welfare state. What about the poor and the weak? Yeah, that's true, you can kind of talk about it. What happens to the poor and the weak, and so on. But we first need to fix the 95% of the bullshit. And the bullshit just means that under the pretense of a welfare state, a ton of money is being redistributed. Then it's just said, okay, we're going to create bailout packages. We're saving some banks, redistributing money. We're giving money to the corporations because those corporations are considered systemically important. We're propping up corporations through the credit and debt money system that aren't even profitable anymore. That wouldn't even exist in the free market. And that leads to massive distortions. And that also leads to the big gap between the rich and the poor. It's not capitalism that's the problem here, but it's the central money system, the fiat money system, that Milei always talks about very critically. He's also talking about an expansion of the state, how the state keeps getting bigger. And just like that, the state is expanding. The fiat money system is expanding just like that. It's all connected. That means you really have to understand it. The pro is the bigger picture. When you talk about freedom here, the money system is part of it. Then Bitcoin is part of it. Of course, it also includes getting rid of the bullshit. Politicians are posting about getting rid of some bullshit ministries. Then free market mechanisms are part of it. A whole lot of things are part of this. Milei is addressing this very radically, where the problems are right now. He's also pointing out what can be done better. He demonstrates it with Argentina. He has also called for a free currency competition. Guys, this is super explosive. What's going on here? And this could really be the starting shot of a new freedom movement. And it's no coincidence that there are a whole lot of people here. In the Bitcoin scene, there are a lot of big fans of Milei. Even if he's being criticized here, let's say, because he's still a politician. Because he's still kind of holding a political office here. But Milei is at least heading in the right direction, which is towards a smaller government, less regulation, bring out the chainsaw. Someone wrote to me earlier, hey Mark, are you actually a chainsaw liberal? I thought that too. That's definitely a funny compliment. A chainsaw liberal. I would call myself a liberal Bitcoin maximalist. I don't know what else to call it. I wouldn't want to put myself in any box. That's why. I wouldn't want to say I'm this or that, because then you limit yourself again when you put yourself in a box. But it's definitely interesting how people here are judging me in the comments. For sure, hey, if you're bullish on freedom, if you're bullish on Bitcoin, then go ahead and drop a link down below, where you can easily and securely buy Bitcoin at 21 Coin, just use the code Bitcoin. Up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Let me know what you think about Milei's absolute fire speech here. See you later. Peace out.